This is a must-read for any Chicago sports fan. It's called A Chosen Bullet, Broken Man's Triumph Through Faith and Sports. And the author joins us today on CTL. Tell us about his journey, Bill Renje.
It's good to be here, guys. Thanks
Good to have you. Welcome in.
Thank you.
I did not know about your story, and this gentleman right here, when we're not screaming at each other, was telling me all about the story. For people unfamiliar with it, take us through the start of your story back, I believe, 1989.
Sure. Yeah, my story, started out really the night of June 17th, 1989. And prior to that, I'd gotten involved in drugs and running with a rough crowd. I was raised, in and around sports, a big Chicago sports fan, competing in baseball and football. But I got away from that in high school. Started getting involved with a bad crowd and started out, smoking weed, just very innocently, casually, but that led to full-fledged drug abuse. And by the time I was a senior, I was selling drugs, on a small scale to support my habit, scalping concert tickets to support my habit, and all that culminated on the night of June 17th, 1989. A buddy of mine and I had been at a graduation party. The party broke up about 1, 2 in the morning, but we weren't ready to call it a night just yet. And my friend wanted to go out to a well-known drug house that we had been to on the south side many times before. We pulled in, but this time there was a drug raid ongoing. And we saw what was going on, a lot of crazy activity, drug dealers laying face down with their hands behind their head, what looked to be plainclothes undercover police officers running around gathering people up. So jail not sounding like a very good option. We decided to get out of there, and as we did that, a plainclothes undercover police officer came up to my window, my driver's side window, with his gun drawn. I was basically staring at a 9mm Glock from 5 feet away. He told me in no uncertain terms to get out of my car, and when I didn't do that, I started to take off, and the car nudged him, and the gun went off. And I heard the shot sound like an M80. I saw the flash. The driver's side window shattered. All this was in an instant. And then I knew instantly something was wrong because the bullet had ripped through my flesh and pierced my spinal cord, the 6th and 7th cervical vertebrae, deflated my right lung, and I was unable to breathe. Thought I was going to die. And I remember right then and there saying, please, God, don't let me go out like this. I don't want this to be the last memory that I leave behind for my parents and my brothers. Well, obviously, he gave me another opportunity because I'm here talking to you gentlemen today.
And the thing about the book is that you spend a lot of time discussing how, sports, Chicago sports, you grew up a fan of, helped you overcome some very difficult times. And I thought one of the interesting parts, there's a lot of interesting parts in there, but one of the parts about, your heroes, Ditka, Peyton, and Jordan, just how you internalize some of the things that you would see on television or watching sporting events, whether in person or whatever, and how, you found some strength in that, and that kind of kept you going at a very difficult time.
Yeah, I really did, David. Sports has always been a prominent part of my background, and, I was introduced to the sport of wheelchair rugby 2 years post-injury in 1991. I wasn't a very good player at first. I was a bench player, but I took the number 23, which I used throughout my career, switched over to 34 after Walter died, but my whole emphasis was trying to emulate those guys, their characteristics, studying them, the determination, the drive, the sense of purpose, trying to overcome any obstacle in front of you. And I went from an end of the bench player to somebody 5 years later who was on the U.S. national team. Was part of the team that went to Atlanta in '96 where we took gold, Toronto in 1998 where we won the gold at World Championships, and then the pinnacle of my career, I was very blessed to go to Sydney, Australia in 2000 where we won the gold as well. But again, all that just kind of carrying the teams that I studied growing up, that I followed, and a lot of those players, and trying to emulate, that toughness and that grit that I found those guys to have.
How did you discover wheelchair rugby? Because I'm more familiar with a lot of other maybe wheelchair sports, not as familiar with that. How did you kind of come across it and get involved to start with?
Well, I was introduced to it when I was in rehab. I remember seeing a poster on the wall for the sport, and at the time, I had to have a nurse push me from my hospital bed. Had to get me out of my hospital bed into a wheelchair, push me to the elevator to get me up to therapy. And I remember looking at that going, wow, that would be pretty cool to play, but I don't even know how to push a wheelchair, let alone compete with these guys, flying up and down the court. It's a very intense game. But I've always been a team sport guy. Like I said, I grew up playing baseball, grew up following football, so it was very intriguing to me. And when I started to reconnect with those sporting roots, I decided to give the sport a shot and was very taken. I fell in love with it right away.
Most disappointing Chicago sports loss? Was it the '84 Cubs? Was it the Bears never coming back and repeating after winning it in the '85 season? Is it the DePaul teams that got to the tournament and couldn't take another step? '03 Cubs? Was there a White Sox season? So what
can I say all the above and just call it a night? I mean, really, all of those teams. I mean, starting with the DePaul teams, most people forget about those, but they were the #1 seed 3 years in a row, and that '81 team that lost to St. Joe's on a buzzer beater, that just broke my heart. I was
756.
I was 10 years old, and I remember just being so deflated, and then the White Sox. I mean, they lost to a better team in Baltimore. You can kind of accept that. The Cubs in '84, again, another heartbreak because they were there. And only the Cubs can lose a series in the fashion that team did. The Garvey home run, and then everything that occurred the next day with Sutcliffe going, your horse who hadn't lost since June of that year, and then follow up even those Bears teams because it was the old shoulda, coulda, woulda.
The one theme I think that comes through in the book, and I think it's a great thing about sports, is you talk about the ability to reach someone's potential and unfulfilled potential. You see all sorts of examples in sports on teams, so your favorite teams, your favorite athletes. But can you talk about just what that message is and just how you looked at how sports and gave you an opportunity to get over some tough times and then reach your potential?
Yeah, I think so often, we don't realize the talent, the potential we have. We're either lazy in not fulfilling that potential, or we put a cap on that potential. And when you look at teams like the '05 White Sox, for instance, that really nobody thought much of them coming into the season, but they reached their potential. They pushed past some tough times at the end of the season, and yet they ended up winning the World Series. And for me, I think I learned a lot from sports about the effort. When you look at Peyton, when you look at Jordan, when you look at some of these guys, and sure, they were talented, but they pushed themselves beyond that talent to a whole other level. And I tried to do that when I was competing, and then beyond that, in the business world and in my marriage and my family, a lot of the values that I learned from team sports, I've tried to basically transition into other areas.
Cap, I'll tell you what, his encyclopedia recall of Chicago sports rivals yours. That would be a great trivia. We should have set up a trivia contest. You guys he emails me after columns, and that's how I came to know Bill from last fall when he sent me his manuscript, and I hear from him after columns, and it's a really good.
Does he ever yell at you like I do?
Absolutely. There are times.
I keep him honest.
Yeah. But through email, it's a little bit.
We have
less,
to keep him on.
It's a little bit less annoying. It's email. It's not as loud as it is.
It's me calling you this morning.
Exactly.
I try to put things in all cap and bold it when necessary.
Exactly.
But
I called him this morning. He answered the phone like this: "Wow, you didn't agree with the column." Like he was shocked. Message: there are kids watching this show right now. What would you say to them?
I would say, surround yourself with good people. I mean, I am where I am, really because of nothing I've done. But I decided at an age I wish I would have done a little earlier to really seek out what God's will was for my life, and then ultimately I surrounded myself with good people. Rely on the foundation that my parents raised me to live, and when you put people around you who are serious about doing the right thing in life and were serious about fulfilling their potential, it's really hard for you not to raise your game to that level, so to speak.
And I write about him in tomorrow's Tribune.
There you go. Appreciate you being here.
Good to be here. Thanks.
God
for
bless.
having me, guys. Thank you.
There you go. A Chosen Bullet, A Broken Man's Triumph Through Faith in Sports by Bill Renje. Outstanding read. Hope you all pick up a copy. Thank you.
Thank you.